Welcome classic rock fans to one of my ranking videos, and today we're looking at the 10 worst Beatles songs. Now this is one that's been requested by so many of you in the comments of my original video, the 10 best Beatles songs. So I thought I'd mull it over and try and compile a list of the 10 Fab Four faux pas. And stick around to the end, of course, where there'll be a few honourable, or should I say dishonourable mentions. Number 10 is Slow Down from 1964. This is actually a cover of a Larry Williams number which he released in 1958. The original song was the B-side to Dizzy Miss Lizzy, if I'm not mistaken. But I rather dislike this one. It feels like it's been extracted from an impromptu jam. In terms of its tone and textures, it's very much in the same vein as I Saw Her Standing There. But this one tends to feel a little bit like a kind of rock and roll parody. This song actually featured on the Long Tall Sally EP, but this song is terribly sloppy in many respects, with numerous vocal fluffs, and George Martin does add quite an interesting piano part to this. But overall it does have a kind of a workman-like feel to it, even a guitar lead which feels a little bit pedestrian, I think. Number 9 is Boys from 1963, arguably the weakest song on Please Please Me. And it's not just Ringo, it's just a rather generic doo-wop number that the Beatles failed to breathe any fire or life into. Boys was recorded in a single take on the 11th of February 1963. Actually marks the Ringo Starr's first recorded lead vocal. The song apparently was just churned out very quickly, and I suppose you can extract anything from that. It's a testimony to just how good the Beatles were as a playing outfit. I think how tight they'd become since the Hamburg years. The fact that it was recorded in one take, and the band's tightness and proficiency, I suppose, in performing this one might come down to the fact that Ringo Starr used to perform it with his time with Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. Number 8 is Sun King from the Abbey Road album from 1969. Certainly in terms of the medley, this song feels like a bit of a snooze fest, really. And especially when it descends into that rather cod Spanish, Italian, Portuguese nonsense, punctuated with the odd English phrase. My research suggests that John Lennon was possibly inspired by The Sun King, which was Nancy Mitford's 1966 biography of Louis XIV. Number 7 is Act Naturally from 1965. My God, this is a dreadful number. Ringo Does Country. Of course, the original was by Buck Owens, recorded in 1963, which topped the US Billboard Country Singles Chart that year. It was actually recorded by the Beatles to replace the abandoned If You've Got Trouble. Well, Ringo, of course, singing country with that very familiar Scouser accent. I mean, it works so well. I think when he comes in with that first line, they're going to put me in the movies, you realise this song is just not going to work. I mean, my opinion might be biased by the fact that I'm not a huge country fan either. So Ringo on vocals plus country equals Act Naturally. Number 6 is Don't Bother Me from 1963, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the first song actually written by George Harrison. I mean, he had sung lead vocals on a couple of tunes about this time as well, including Lennon and McCartney's pen Do You Want to Know a Secret, which is another song I don't like, to be honest with you, but this is a minor key moper. Don't Bother Me, of course, would later feature in the nightclub scene of the Beatles' Hard Day's Night. Over time, there's no doubt that George Harrison would sharpen up as a songwriter and contribute some remarkable songs to the Beatles canon, if you will. Many have argued that the song is a little bit out of keeping in terms of the tone of what the Beatles were doing at the time, and in many respects could argue that it's a foreshadowing of some of the brilliant work that would come from Harrison a bit later on. But this song, this plea for privacy, was actually recorded on the 11th of September 1963. The Beatles returned to it a couple of times, eventually with Harrison's vocals being double-tracked on it, with Lennon, McCartney and Ringo Starr adding percussion, with I think Lennon playing tambourine and McCartney hit a woodblock and Starr played an Arabian bongo. Well, there you are, a recipe for what, I don't know. Number 5 is You've Really Got a Hold on Me from 1963. This is my least favourite Beatles cover. In fact, I'm not even that fond of it when Smokey Robinson does it. But the Beatles just don't sing it with the same emotion and power that the original had. It comes across as rather lifeless and limp. This song was actually recorded on the 18th of July 1963, and it was the first song attempted during the With the Beatles album sessions. The group apparently took several sessions to actually perfect it. They did attempt a re-recording of this on the 17th of October, which suggests to me that they just weren't happy with it anyway, but eventually just gave up. The version we do end up with on the album is actually a composite of several different versions. Number 4 is Blue Jay Way from 1967, a song named after a street in the Hollywood Hills of Los Angeles where Harrison stayed in August 1967 before visiting Haight-Ashbury. The rhythm track and the swirling organ was recorded on the 6th of September 1967, and there's quite a prolific use of ADT, artificial double tracking, a technique invented by Abbey Road engineer Ken Townsend in 1966 for the Revolver album. This of course gives the number its very psychedelic phasing effect. Many people like this one, they feel it's ambitious and they like the yearning quality that it has, whilst others, like my good self, feel it's a monotonous drone. One fan of this song is A Consequence of Sound. They describe it as, it is a haunted house of a hit, adding an ethereal, creepy mythos to the City of Angels. But unfortunately, it's just not for me, although I did like Susie and the Banshees version. Number 3 is Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby from 1964, from the Beatles For Sale album. This is a Carl Perkins number, but the Beatles version feels rather uninspired, a bit dashed off, lazy, perhaps. And George Harrison's vocals are heavily affected by the use of Steed effect, which is send, tape, echo, echo, delay. It gives this very heavy processed sound to his voice. The Beatles entered the recording studio on the 24th of May 1963. It was for an edition of a BBC radio broadcast called Pop Goes the Beatles. I think it was recorded in Studio 2 of Aeolian Hall, London. Nevertheless, this is a song I like to skip. Number 2 is Flying from 1967 from the Magical Mystery Tour album. This is just a bit of instrumental hogwash, really. It represents a collaboration by all 4 Beatles for the album and, of course, the TV movie. One commentator has described it as sounding like the soundtrack to your worst ever Eggman and walrus-populated nightmare. Magical Mystery Tour is not a top-notch Beatles album anyway, in my humble opinion. It's numbers like this that bring down the collective brilliance of other tracks like I Am the Walrus and Fall on the Hill. The original number was recorded on the 8th of September and had the working title of Aerial Tour Instrumental. It originally had a kind of a New Orleans coda as well and rattled on for about 9 minutes, but thankfully, mercifully, it was cut right down. And number 1 for me is Revolution 9 from the White Album 1968. John Lennon's infamous 8-minute crack-gazing sound collage. It's obviously work of Lennon and Ono, which wouldn't be out of place on some of the other guff that they were producing at this time as solo albums. It's jarring and abrasive and kind of ends the album or brings the album to a close almost, certainly on a rather sour and dour note. It's just a bit of avant-garde soundscaping with a lot of jabbering, eerie noises and sound effects put together over random clips. This sonic collage of absolute nonsense, really. Most of us wouldn't mind if this featured as a kind of a B-side or featured on one of Lennon and Ono's projects like the Wedding album. But on the White Album, what the tragic thing about this track is I sort of feel, imagine what brilliant songs were left off that album to make room for this 9 minutes of absolute piffle. And there you are, there's my 10 worst Beatles album, and it's a testimony to how brilliant the band were, considering a lot of these are actually cover versions. So as I promised at the start of this video, we'd look at a few dishonourable mentions. Wild Honey Pie from the White Album 1968. There's a lot of self-indulgence on the White Album. The White Album is generally an uneven record. I mean, I love it, don't get me wrong, but this is just a bit of nonsense, really. Next one is Dig It, which went on much longer, I think. There's probably a lot more of it in the can, and hopefully it stays there, really. But this is just a bit of an impromptu jam. They're obviously enjoying themselves, but it certainly shouldn't have appeared on the album. Do You Want to Know a Secret? I can't stand this one. It seems to be very much written in the style of a kind of a 50s ballad, and it's rather mawkish. And a lot of you will point to the fact that I haven't mentioned those usual suspects, those usual reprobates that appear on lists like this, the McCartney pen numbers like Oblida Oblida and of course Maxwell Silver Hammer. Good reason for that. I actually rather like those ones. I like a bit of McCartney tunesmithery, and I rather enjoy these ones, and my children love them. Mind you, my children also love the song Yellow Submarine as well, so it brings them so much joy, and myself, if I'm going to come clean. So they haven't featured on this list. Many of you will think that's a glaring omission. Anyway, there you go. There's my list of what I consider the worst Beatles songs. I'd love to know what yours are. Please do leave them in the comments below. Other than that, I hope you're well, staying healthy and safe, looking forward to Christmas, but more importantly that you keep listening.